How does a nation that was rescued by solidarity of an entire continent turn against the very people who once stood by it? How does a country whose freedom was financed, defended and celebrated by Africans, from Nigeria to Ghana, from Kenya to Zimbabwe, become a place where fellow Africans are sometimes treated as enemies? This is the painful contradiction of modern South Africa, a nation born from the defeat of apartheid, yet still struggling with division, a nation that inspired the world under Nelson Mandela, yet repeatedly shaken by xenophobic violence. Why does this keep happening? Why do Africans seeking opportunity become targets of anger and resentment? And what does this reveal about the unfinished struggle for justice in South Africa? Tonight on Kann Media Group, we examine one of the most difficult and emotional issues facing the continent: why xenophobia keeps returning in South Africa. When apartheid ended in 1994, South Africa symbolized hope. Mandela's election represented reconciliation, dignity, and the promise of a multiracial democracy. Many expected that freedom would quickly deliver jobs, housing, and broad economic opportunity. But the legacy of apartheid was deeply entrenched. Decades later, South Africa remains one of the world's most unequal societies. Large numbers of citizens continue to face unemployment, poverty, and limited prospects. For many, the dream of liberation has not yet translated into economic security. When jobs are scarce and living costs rise, frustration intensifies. Some migrants from elsewhere in South Africa are highly entrepreneurial. They open shops, work long hours, and build businesses with modest resources. In many communities, they become visible participants in local economy. For some South Africans, however, these successes are perceived as competition for already limited opportunities. This perception can fuel resentment, even though the deeper causes of hardship are structural issues such as inequality, weak service delivery, and slow economic growth. In times of social distress, it can be tempting for leaders or activists to place blame on outsiders. Migrants may be accused of taking jobs, increasing crime, or straining public services. Such claims can oversimplify complex realities and redirect anger away from the underlying policy challenges. When this rhetoric spreads, tensions can escalate rapidly. Communities already under pressure may become more susceptible to violence and vigilantism. Xenophobic violence tends to recur during periods of heightened economic and political pressure. Shops are looted, neighborhoods destabilized, and trust between Africans is damaged. The consequences extend beyond those directly affected. They undermine regional cooperation, discourage investment, and weaken the ideals of African unity. Most importantly, they leave enduring trauma for both migrants and host communities. It is essential to remember that xenophobia does not define all South Africans. Millions reject violence and continue to support tolerance and coexistence. Civil society groups, religious organizations, and ordinary citizens have repeatedly defended the rights and dignity of migrants. The problem lies in recurring social pressures and failures to address root causes, not in the character of an entire nation. South Africa remains one of Africa's most influential countries, and its future matters to the whole continent. Lasting solutions require more than condemning violence after it erupts. South Africa needs stronger economic inclusion, effective governance, and responsible public discourse. African governments also need to deepen regional cooperation and create opportunities at home so that migration is only driven by choice rather than by desperation. Above all, Africans must rediscover the principle that their destinies are interconnected. So what do you think? Is xenophobia in South Africa primarily a symptom of economic frustration, political scapegoating, or a broader crisis of identity? And how can Africa build a future where fellow Africans are seen not as threats, but as partners? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Kann Media Group, because the struggle for Africa unity did not end with apartheid. In many ways, it is only beginning.